All right. So thank you everybody for joining. This is kind of the first remote huddle for the year. So thank you for taking time out of your day. And thank you, Vivek, again for jumping on with us today. I did have a quick little slide deck just so that we kind of have a visual of where we're going with this call. And again, it's going to be super casual. So this is really a space for us to, of course, talk to Vivek and learn more about why video is so important, when you're working remote. But then also, if you have any questions, thoughts, stories, there will be time for a kind of like Q&A session towards the end where we can kind of discuss whatever's on our mind. And it's supposed to be small. It's supposed to be intimate. That way we can all, share what we have on our brains and minds as we go along. So, and again, these will be happening probably monthly, depends on how many, guests and topics and things like that. So watch out for the newsletter, and that'll always have the next remote huddle and who it's going to be with. Today, I'm super excited to have Vivek. He is actually the founder of Pragly, which is a super cool tool for remote teams to really help with communication, help with that dynamic of, feeling like you're in an office when you're not really in an office. So kind of like having that mental switch, and I'll kind of let Vivek kind of dive into that a little more. But yeah, if you want to get started, Vivek, can you tell us about you and then your background, where you're located, and then how did Pragly kind of come to be?
I think we lost audio.
Yeah, I think so too.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're good.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. All right, cool. So, hi, I'm Vivek, and my journey into remote was a little bit kind of windy. So I'll just start from that. So I'm actually from a small town called Bakersfield originally. So it's snack dab between San Francisco and LA. So agricultural community, very small. But anyway, when I graduated, went up to the Bay Area at Stanford, and then I, worked on computer science there, and absolutely loved it. But in my final year, made a company and, raised some financing for it, and with a few other friends, and then just operated that for a couple of years, and then eventually sold it 2 years in. So, and that's what kind of led me to my remote journey, because the acquiring company was based down in San Jose, and I was up in San Francisco. So I was commuting down virtually every day, and in this very soul-sucking commute where I was hating my life at 6:30 p.m. on the 101, and it's like, there has to be a better way. I'm basically going into an office, which was a great, awesome environment, right? Good coworkers, good product. Going into an office just to essentially slack the person who was next to me. And I just didn't feel like that was like the best and most efficient use of my time. My social life was going down the toilet because I was like constantly spending a bunch of time in traffic. So basically on the 101 in my Camry, passing by Google, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to switch to remote. I'm going to ask to do that. So that was my first foray into remote work, negotiated it, never looked back. And basically after a year of working at this company, and it was a great environment, learned a lot, but I also got the itch to work on my next business. So basically, like looking at the problem space of the things I was working on, I was most attracted to the remote space. I was like, in many ways, even though we have all this digital communication, Slack, Zoom, all these ways of mechanisms of communicating, it didn't feel like the exactly correct medium was created in order for people to feel necessarily like very present with each other, and also to communicate very quickly in this sort of high fidelity way that doesn't necessarily have to feel so formal as a Zoom meeting. So basically that was a problem statement. And my previous co-founder and me actually started to work on this product, which is Pragly. And basically the one-liner for it is it's a virtual office for remote teams. So built it over the course of the last 9 months, and been really pushing it out to a whole bunch of teams. So a lot of teams are starting to use it and adopt it, and we're getting a lot more teams on it. And we think we found the correct formula of how do you provide the right social signaling for remote workers, combined with like their ability to quickly communicate with each other. So that's the prompt. And yeah, but like, I'd love to dive into why video is so important, and, really push any remote worker when they're working inside of a distributed environment, to leave open that channel for communication, so they can really feel more engaged with their team.
And when you're kind of talking about practically, I don't know if you're pitching it to, a remote team, what are those like core problems that practically is solving for that you're like
Yeah.
do you kind of evaluate, how they're using video in their current team, or do you kind of just say like, practically solves 1, 2, 3? Like,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's an interesting mixed bag. Normally, I try to pitch them on what the problem they're solving is. So for me, I always talk about my narrative, and a lot of people gravitate to that. They gravitate to the loneliness, the sort of like, how do I feel more bonded with my team? Right, I'm working like 1,000 miles away from them, but I still like, and I'm constantly chatting with them. But how do I feel more bonded with them? How do I feel more present as they're actually there, so I can actually like work more closely together? And the second is also, how do we just quickly communicate? And although you have this idea of Slack messaging, it's still text, right? I think everybody knows that these times where I'm sending a message to somebody, and we think it's going to be a very quick message, right? It's like, have you pushed this commit? Have you emailed this person? And all of a sudden it devolves into this back and forth. They're like, well, I didn't do that because you didn't do this. And I was like, and then you provide more and more clarity. And all of a sudden what should have been a 2 to 5 minute long conversation that could have been resolved over a higher fidelity medium immediately devolves into this 30 minute back and forth where everybody's wasting their time. They can't really dive into deep work anymore. So that's the first of it, right? Like, how do you eliminate the sort of unnecessary chatting that goes back and forth, that unnecessary typing? And then the other side of it is that we saw a lot of people are just passing around Zoom links, and Zoom is great. The quality of the video is fantastic, but the sort of mechanisms for communications, like how do you enter into those conversations quickly? And we were seeing a lot of teams who were sort of hacking around this problem. Like, what we would hear a lot is that people were creating these always on Zoom channels where everybody was in it. And in theory, it sounded good, but for a lot of people, they started to abandon it just because it felt too privacy invasive, right? Like, if I'm on video all the time, I don't want to be on video all the time. If I see that little green dot on my Mac, it's a little bit scary, right? It's like, oh crap, did I do something with my nose right now? I don't know. So yeah, those were the two extremes, is like too much privacy invasion versus too much typing. So we feel like we really settle into a niche middle ground where basically we actually have this idea of using these live avatars, actually, where we use the live avatars with a mix of different social signals, like, are you listening to Spotify? What's your calendar look like at this time? Is it a personal or work calendar? And we can all consolidate that into your little avatar. So it gives you a better perception of what exactly they're doing. And once you have that perception of what they're doing, how do you actually initiate a conversation? Like, if they're listening to Spotify, they're probably not on a customer call. They're probably not doing something that's like actually talking to somebody else. So if they're doing that, I might be able to reach them if it's actually super urgent. So providing all those social signals on top of it to actually give an adequate way of communicate with them correctly.
Awesome. I think like when you think about just the challenges that you face when you're remote, right? You're no longer in an office. Now you're not millions of miles, but maybe thousands of miles away from like, yeah, I don't know.
Hello.
We don't have any location tracking, so it's all good. That'd be kind of creepy. So when you think about those challenges, and there's a ton of companies that don't make video a priority. Like, I used to work for a company that we'd do stand-ups, and all the devs were off of video, and it was really like maybe the PM, maybe myself, right? We're the video ones. But it was just like so awkward trying to get them to be like, hey, turn your video on. Like, it was a constant reminder. So like, by not having video as part of your everyday kind of dynamic with your team, what do you think that like, what are the long-term effects of that
for sure
for a company or for a team?
Yeah. So there's a couple different points, and first of all, it's an amazing question, right? It's like you're constantly reminding them to change their pattern of behavior, and the sort of unfortunate thing is that you do constantly have to remind them to make it a habit, right? But you always have to motivate it by a couple different things. Number one, fidelity, and with respect to fidelity of a conversation, even if I have audio, you can't tell whether I'm happy or sad or something's happened to, or I look bothered, right? All these emotional things are basically transparent on you. And basically, especially since so much of decision making is based on emotion, right? Like if I want you to do something and you clearly are not stoked to do that thing, oftentimes masking yourself behind a video, it makes it even worse, because then you keep telling them to do something and you keep getting excited about what they could potentially do, and they're saying okay, and then they're actually getting more pissed off because they have to do this one more thing on top of another 50 things they have to do. Maybe I could have phrased that better. Maybe I could have been like, oh, I know there's a ton of stuff going on right now, but if you have a little bit more time this week or next week, you don't want people to feel upset. So the higher fidelity communication that allows you to actually get a more emotional signal is super, super important, especially when there's a high intensity and potentially tense pushback that you have to have with somebody in order to really coordinate with them well. So that's the first thing. And the second is just also as a culture building tool. I've definitely been in Zoom conversations before where it's been like 15 people, and around 15 of them sound exactly the same. And it's really hard to feel like, these are not just random people elsewhere and I have this gray silhouette in my mind of how they look like. So it's hard for me to actually feel bonded with them and actually care about who they are as people. And personally for me, other people are different, but for me, when I'm building a team, I want to actually feel like we're in the trenches together, right? We're all working on towards the same goal. You can see me, you can see that I'm laughing at your joke. All those things are super important to feel like a team, especially if you're going to be spending the next 3 to 5 years of your life like working very closely with them. So that's the second thing, is like, how do you sort of instill that communication layer and like make you feel more bonded? And the third on top of that is basically I think we've all been in situations where, even if you're not remote right now, where you've taken a day off, maybe, you got to pick up your kid, you got to sign for a package, and you're at home and the rest of the people are inside of the office, right? And in those sort of asymmetric environments where you are like the only remote worker at your own home office, and everybody is inside of the hybrid, sorry, the office room, inside of the conference room. They're all talking back and forth. They can see each other in person. There's a little bit of asymmetry, right? Because you feel like the odd one out. So good video can be a great leveler for that. You're still the odd one out because you're the only one on the video screen, but at least they can see your face. So there's an element of like, how do you instill that sort of visual equality inside of the organization? And we also have tactics on top of that, which is not just video, but like what we recommend to a lot of organizations is that even if they have people who are inside the office and they're all working off of some video conference, like let's say there's like a Zoom camera inside of the conference room. What we normally say is like, hey, don't use a Zoom camera, distribute Zoom links to everybody. Make sure that only one person is unmuted if they're inside of the conference, and make sure they all have their laptop in front of them. So basically what that instills is that all of a sudden, 15 people could be involved in the conversation. 12 of them could be inside of a conference room together. But basically what happens is that you have 15 people who all look visually the same inside of a Zoom. And that's actually worked very, very, very well for many teams that we've proposed to. Basically, there's all of a sudden this visual equality between everybody. And they feel like their opinion is not just coming from like this remote place, it's coming from a place of equality. So just some preliminary thoughts along that vein.
Yeah, I think like setting up a team to do that. I think in the beginning it's always hard because you have so many technical difficulties, like who's unmuted and who's not muted, and there's feedback. But once you get into that rhythm, right, of like, we're gonna get into a conference room, there's gonna be folks calling in, and then it kind of just becomes like a habit. Like it's gonna be weird if we're not all on our computers and calling in now. So yeah, I think all of this kind of leads into our big topic, which is how video tools like Pregly, like Zoom, improve just overall communication. Georgette, Dora, if you have any thoughts on this too, like feel free to jump in. Definitely don't want it to be just like.
Yeah. So, sorry, I just had music in the background, so I was trying to mute it.
You're good.
Absolutely.
No, so we do a stand-up like for ourselves, and the thing I didn't realize is we started with video, and then my team's pretty small, so we're like 3-4 people, and then it became like, why do we have this? Like, our Wi-Fi's kind of wonky on my end. Can we all like turn it off? And then like we just kind of got used to just seeing each other's photos. So the other day, one person changed their photo, and it was the most exciting thing for all of us. We're like, oh, when did you go to this other location, and where were you traveling? Because it's like, but it is one of those elements like you do really miss. So it's kind of funny when we do video calls now, like we try to make it like if we're like doing it more than 2, then we'll try to do a video call. And that's usually like if we're partnering up with a new person, or like, if we're bringing someone on like as a contractor, we'll do a video call. I'm not sure if that's just because we've seen each other so much, so now we're just like, I don't know, lazy or used to it, but it is like always exciting when we see each other.
Yeah, and also the background's changing. It kind of creates that conversation. You move, for example, and everybody was like, "What's this new background?" So it's like that added, like, oh, like that spark of there is a human connection here. Like it's not just work.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, Thor.
Oh no.
So no, like I was thinking of how it's kind of hard for us. Well, I'm that person in our group where at the start of the call and we're like waiting for everyone to go on. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Hey, I saw it's your birthday. Like, what are you guys gonna do? And then like I will distract it on accident, and then like it's always like my manager is like trying to pull it back. So it's sometimes a little hard, I find, to get that team personal level connection that I kind of missed when I was in an office, because like that kind of naturally happened. I don't know if that usually happens with like video, because I always feel like here's a structure, we're coming into a meeting, there's really no time for small talk. Does anyone else feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. I think I worked on a remote team, but we've interviewed between 50 and 70 remote teams, and here's what was probably one of the most mind-blowing statistics is that we asked them how many impromptu audio video conversations did you have per week with your team that just wasn't related to work. And it would be 1 or less, which is nuts, right? Because you think about the number of impromptu audio video conversations that are happening inside of office. If I go to get some coffee, right, then I bump into somebody. I'm like, oh, did you watch the Niners game? Or did you watch LeBron do that one dunk? And then it just happens naturally. Or if you're at the cafeteria, or you're inside the lunchroom, it just happens. So absolutely, I think it does. And kind of in the vein of things that we sort of recommend for people to do that people really like, but can feel a little bit, at the start, it feels a little bit weird because you wouldn't naturally have to schedule these things, are things like virtual icebreakers, virtual happy hours. Actually, people love that. Like every Thursday, like at 5
How did they do that?
Yeah, so basically it'll be like, okay, 5 p.m., this is like, or whatever time is most convenient for everybody. Like, you go get your beer / Coke / whatever else, beverage of convenience, and then we're just all gonna, or coffee if it's early for them, we're just gonna chat about life. There's no subject matter. It's just banter. And that works really well for people. People find out really cool stuff. And, you can have a loose structure around it and say, hey, we're profiling Andy today. Andy might be like, we know nothing about Andy. Like Andy's always just all business, right? And it's like, we'd like to know that Andy actually has a life outside of business. And it turns out he does. He's been to Everest and all these other different places. So we always recommend that. It's one of those things that's awkward to bring up. And normally what we say is that, like to try to get manager buy-in. It's often important on a one-on-one basis to just say, hey, I think this should just be fun. I think it'd be fun culture. I've worked with this guy or gal for like a year and a half, and I still have known nothing about them. And then have your manager go in and like kind of set that cadence and set that rhythm. And it's normally like after the first happy hour, people just get it. They're like, oh, okay, I understand why this matters. Like all of a sudden, all the tension I had with this guy just went away because all of a sudden I can see him as a human again. So we always recommend that, and actually people really enjoy that. So are there structured sort of happy hours, or have you tried that in your team, out of curiosity?
I haven't tried it with my team. We've done when I joined, like they had like an ongoing book club when there was
cool.
Yeah, so there's not that many of us. So we kind of try to do it like once a month, and like we'll take turns. Each of us picks a book, and that's kind of gives it a little more structure, so we don't have that awkward moment of like, okay, now what did you do this weekend? It's like, I didn't do anything. I usually don't do anything. But it's been great, but then it's also just kind of like sometimes like the discussion doesn't go anywhere because we're just like, oh, this book wasn't that great. None of us resonated with it. So it's sometimes hard to, I don't know, to kind of get to know people past it. I have to like confront that awkward, tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
Well, it's scary because we don't really know, well, not scary, but we don't really know a lot about the person that we're working with sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, you're just kind of onboarded, and then you're like, okay, this is your new engineer, your new like project manager or whatever. There's never really like a time set for, unless you do like a coffee chat to introduce yourself. But I've never really experienced it as like I know everybody's background. It's just like kind of like jump in and get to work kind of thing. I have tried doing like one-on-one video calls like right when I start, like a coffee chat sort of thing with my coworkers, and that's helped just to learn about their like where they came from, what they were doing before, how they like to work and all that, and that's really helped me at least. But again, it's like all proactive. Like there's no like guidebook to tell you like on your first week, make sure like you talk with this person and get to know them. Because after that first week passes, it's kind of like heads down and everybody's just like work. Like,
yeah, no, I feel that way. Like when someone joins, like everyone's like open to try something, so we can all like so usually when someone joins or a new contractor comes in, we're like, oh, let's all do like the cheesy. Everyone gets a fun fact, and it cannot be about what you are working on. And everyone like will just kind of join in and like do it to like make me happy, which I appreciate. But obviously, like once you've been in the trenches for too long, then it's just kind of hard to be like, can we do that thing again? Granted, I've been talking to you this whole month.
Exactly.
Okay. Gonna have to awkwardly just.
Yeah. One thing that I found about this is, has anybody heard of Donut, the tool?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I haven't tried it yet though.
Yeah, people really like that. I mean, it's very simple, right? It just matches people up, but it's an interesting way of just having something else do the scheduling for you, right? It's like, it's not a manager, it's all of a sudden just a tool, and the tool is just designed to do this matching. Yeah. But people found that to be helpful, and it just kind of instills that routine in people. So maybe that'll be helpful too. But
like that, yeah. I saw it in passing once, and I was like, I gotta look into it, and I'm sure it's like in my million of bookmarks. Like, look into this one day.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, like one thing I have heard about the happy hour thing is like, how do you kickstart it? How do you get that activation energy, right? What sort of questions you have to ask, right? Like, and how do you prevent that sort of, who's going to be the awkward like person who says, oh, so what did you do this weekend? Somebody has to break that ice. Exactly. But that's why, in the same vein as what Irma did, having a topic of discussion probably wouldn't be so work focused. Like in your own team.
Yeah.
But having just a general topic of discussion and somebody just like leading that somewhat is a cool way to do it, and then hopefully it opens up into a broader audience too.
I wanted to move into kind of like any thoughts, questions, stories, or anything you want to ask Vivek while he's here, about Pragly, about any challenges that you're facing at your current role. I know, Georgette, you gave us the one that you were facing, which is good. No, it's perfect. But yeah, any time for questions or anything like that, that's what I wanted to open it up for here. Or Vivek, if you have any questions for us, like.
Yeah, for sure.
We're here to be researched.
For sure. And feel free to ask me anything, and I'm more than happy to ask other people what they're up to.
Well, I guess I haven't poked around too much with Pragly. So I guess like it kind of gives you like, is it more like real-time update for like what what my desktop or what my background is kind of like working on right now? Or,
So I think it's an interesting one. It's always a little bit easier by showing. Perhaps Irma, you can switch over to that second.
Yeah.
So basically, that's what it looks like. So where people have these sort of live avatars to keep it like fun and quirky. But the idea behind them is that like it's a liver sense of presence, not necessarily to be a way to sort of interrupt somebody, but it's designed to be this tool to kind of like show who's present and available in a better way than Slack. So for us, that little green indicator, that little Slack green indicator really didn't mean much. And we have a couple different ways of configuring it too. But basically with the main mode, the live avatar mode, basically you just kind of craft your own sort of little identity, and that's what you see. So it's like a way to sort of show your identity without like necessarily giving up too much of your privacy. And the second element of that is like, how do you quickly communicate with somebody? So we have kind of two different ways of doing that. Like with the left-hand side, you have these channels. And the main ideas between these channels is that it's very similar to what you would see inside of Slack text channels, but the idea is around more audio and video channels. So basically, if you see all the people inside of those different channels, those are all distinct conversations. So there's one person inside of the silent room. There's like 3 people inside of the water cooler. And the idea is that if 3 people are inside of the water cooler, you can, in a single click, go and join them. So the fact that you're in the same office space doesn't necessarily mean that like you're all in the same conversation, but you can be if in a single click. So the idea is what sort of Slack did to text and like kind of publicizing and making everything more open with text, we want to do with audio and video.
And when I'm in this room, do I get to like talk to just one person at a time, or does it kind of broadcast to the whole room, or is it my choice, I guess?
For sure. So there's no broadcast to the whole room. So if you're inside of the office, by default, you're not in a conversation. So basically anybody with the same underline under their same colored underline under their avatar is in the same conversation. So in this view, Will Hansen's in his own conversation. Minnie, Will, and Rich Veer are in their own conversation. And the idea is that with a click, you can either switch the conversation that you're into a different one, or just leave it entirely. So if you like Claudia at the bottom is just in her, just hanging out. She's not in the conversation, but she is reasonable. She is reachable.
Awesome.
No, I love this because I'm very obsessed. I just got obsessed with the emojis because I finally upgraded my phone. And that's how, like, especially just like being for like, because I just moved, that's how I like at least try to like, I don't always FaceTime friends, but that's how I'm like conveying my emotions. But I joined like a couple of Slack channels with like, you know, remote communities, or like an Atlanta community that works remote, like they made a Slack channel. And I find that not a lot of people are like using it. And I think they'll just put like an update, like, hey, we're going to do happy hour at this bar. Hey, we're going to do this. Have you seen like other communities kind of use Pragly, not for like the company, but just more just like, I guess like a group of friends just wanting to like connect differently, or strangers. Yeah.
It's been weird. There's one person who was evaluating it for their family actually, which I thought was super interesting, but we don't have mobile yet, and that was very important for them. But absolutely, I think there's a whole space around virtual co-working. Where, well, there's virtual co-working, which is still kind of work in the strict sense, even though you're not necessarily the same company. There's an expectation that you're working together. But there's a second, which is just how do you build more authentic audio video based communication in a community. And I think that's something we just happened to stumble into too, that like there's alternative use cases for Pragly that we didn't even realize. So yeah, for us, the answer is yes. I think we've seen many friends who are all just developers just keep this open. And like if people enter into the water cooler, that's a social signal to say, hey, I'm available for chat. And often it's stronger than somebody saying, hey, what's up inside of a water cooler channel in Slack or the random channel. So it's something that we noticed as well. Like it's easy to get a high volume number of people inside of like a Slack community, but in terms of the sort of authentic depth of connection and communication, it's harder in Slack. And I think this could be a different model for that.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to poke around this.
Yeah, it's an open beta, so feel free to use it with however many people you want.
Is there any intention to include like clients at all with this as well? So like being able to communicate with like clients, not only just internally inside of your corporation?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple different ways. Some people invite them directly to the team, but other people, every single one of those channels, you can just copy a guest link and then you just give them the link and they can access that channel through that link. So that's just a good way to sort of consolidate the workflow of Zoom into Pragly as well. And what's cool about that too is that like if you invite somebody else who's like a client or a customer or whatever else into that channel, everybody else can see the fact that you're talking to them. So that kind of makes it like that psychological presence. And like, oh crap, they're on a call and I can join them in a single instance, or they can pull me into this customer conversation if they need me. Both of those elements.
Great. Yeah, I did download this to my desktop, so I'm gonna try to get my team on it, at least for an experiment. Like, let's.
For sure. Yeah, it's I'm curious to see how it goes for sure. Yeah, I think a lot of teams have been stoked about it, so I'm curious to see how the other teams feel about it too.
Yeah, even just creating your avatar, I think that was super exciting for me.
Yeah,
I was like, yeah, this is what I look like.
Do you have any teams that are integrating this on partially remote teams?
Yeah, so we do see a lot of those, less so than the fully distributed teams. So I would say with hybrid environments in general, remote inclusion is a hard one. Just because like hybrid environments, when you have somebody inside of an office and it's just easy to go tap them on the shoulder or have these conversations outside of the context of a digital medium, it becomes a lot harder to facilitate. So although it's a less strong use case there, it's still pretty strong. A lot of people from the office will still log into Pragly in order to make the other sort of remote workers feel more included. So we do see that a lot. Alternative things, how I was talking about the sort of Brady Bunch, like everybody has their own laptop and is visible even if they're in the same location. We recommend that highly for hybrid teams. And people really, really gravitate to that. And especially if it becomes this routine that people really, make as a habit as part of their meetings, then you can get real value out of it. So there's that. And I think we were about to talk about something prior to that. I totally forgot. Anyway, it'll come back to me.
All right. Any other questions, thoughts, stories? If not, we'll probably just close it up a little, not early, but I just want to make sure, we're getting like using the time effectively. I don't want us all just sitting here like looking at each other, even though it's nice. You
can do like the Brady Bunch look down.
Yeah. That's great. But yeah, thank you everybody for attending again. Each time there will be a new one of these. I'm going to try to do them monthly and bring on, somebody like Vivek, somebody who's researched the space. I'll always announce it in the newsletter and allow folks to RSVP. And then if you want to check out pragly.com, or Vivek, I think you guys have a nice little chat there. So if you have questions about it, you guys can.
Absolutely. Yeah. On pragly.com, there's a little intercom chat bubble at the bottom right. So you can use that to ask us any questions. But thank you so much for having me on. And thank you so much for coming. And I'll be coming to the next one just to hang out.
Yeah.
This was fun.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. Awesome. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a nice day.